Most people know that we have a fight-flight response, which means that when I'm threatened, I'm gonna have an automatic, non-cognitive, not thinking response to fight or flee to protect my life. And everything in my body is mobilizing to defend myself. The thing that most people don't know is that if the threat is high enough and fight-flight is not an option, those same very primitive parts of my brain will tell me to freeze or play possum and play dead. And there's all these body changes, and they're not under conscious control. And so the first time we ever saw that freeze in humans and recognized it was in sexual assault. And so we hear, why didn't they do anything? They didn't do anything because their body thought that was the best thing to do, was to freeze. We also recognize it in military and combat service. It happens in surgery. Domestic violence is sort of like those cases, why don't they leave? It's sort of a prolonged freeze. Their body is consistently telling them this is the safest thing. And in reality, when people leave domestic violence situations, when they make efforts to leave, that's often their riskiest time to be killed. So it really is true, holding still saves you. And the thing about it is, freeze is kicked off in humans with fear and actual physical restraint or perceived inescapability, which covers a lot of territory. And it's meant to be there to save our lives, and we go into it. And then when we perceive safety, the body comes out of it usually by a trembling, a shaking feeling. Like if you've ever been in a car accident, often freeze happens in a car accident because you can't go anywhere. If you're getting rear-ended, where are you gonna go? So there's this, I can't get out, and your body freezes, and afterwards you're really shaky, and the body settles back down. So it's a normal cycle that exists for all of us, but many of us are already carrying a lot of high fight, flight, and freeze energy from childhood. Children typically cannot fight or flee. It's much more dangerous for children to fight or flee, so children will freeze in dangerous situations, and if they freeze often, it becomes the default pattern when you're older. Fight, flight feels like tight muscles, rapid heartbeat, breathing quickly, kind of shortened, like you can't focus very easily. Short-term memory is cracky. Constipation, dry mouth, cold hands. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of live in low grade. I think our culture is actually low grade fight flight. It's an adrenalized type. You feel adrenaline. Freeze is more numbness, apathy. I don't care. If it's prolonged, hopeless, a helpless feeling, even if, you know, it can even be a suicidal feeling. Your body feels cold. Instead of constipation, you have diarrhea. People with autoimmune diseases often have a lot of freeze energy in their systems. It's like really, instead of an anxious feeling, it's a depressed, not wanting contact, wanting to isolate kind of thing. And I'm actually seeing it a lot right now. People are like, I can't take, really a sense of being overwhelmed and stuck. That's really what it is. And it can literally mean I can't move, or it can be metaphorical. It can be only in certain situations that trigger it. So recognizing where you are and realizing what you can do about where you are. People will say, oh, mindfulness, like that's a good, like just be mindful. If you're in high fight flight, okay, you can't even sit. You're like so restless, there's so much charge, you're kind of jumpy, it doesn't work. And if you're in freeze, you're numb. There's like, and you're numb for good reason, because there's a lot of feeling in there, but it's kind of trapped inside. So that's not an appropriate way to really, for people in that state, to kind of settle their system. So I'm just gonna run through a couple of quick things that can be done in the moment that are usually very helpful for freeze and high fight flight. The first thing is a thing I call orienting. Orienting would be, right now, if you were to just start looking around the room, really just looking around the room, move your neck and let your eyes kind of track and notice color, shapes, even letting your eye linger, what really attracts you. And I'll explain why moving the neck matters. And so just doing that and kind of noticing. And then engage your ears and start listening to sounds, what you're hearing, words, humming, air, moving. Notice the temperature of your skin. Do you smell anything or taste anything? attention back into the people space. Did you notice a little, what I call down regulation in the room? I heard a few sighs. Okay, we're not asking you to come into your body because often there's too much charge in there. We're asking you to engage your senses. And when you actually move your neck, the nerves that control these muscles are involved in the social nervous system, the relaxed and connected place. You notice when people are really tense, that they kind of, right? They don't, so even just moving your neck actually starts you to down-regulate and come down in your nervous system. And that's one of the safest and easy ways to do it. And if you do it regularly, this is a thing, like it's something you can do in prevention by practicing orienting on a regular basis. And it takes 30 seconds. It's actually like a muscle that you're growing. It settles you for the moment because living in high fight, flight, and freeze is really bad for our health. It's bad for our connection with others. It's, it's not meant to be a long-term thing for mammals especially. So even doing that, we'll be able to access it in times. If you can access it on a regular basis, it's much easier to access in times of crisis. The second tool I would do is it's called internal resourcing. So here I'm actually going to ask you to scan your body a little bit, but instead of kind of noticing what's crappy, as we normally do, actually notice what feels the best right now internally. Even if everything is super crappy and a lot of pain, something is less crappy. Okay? It might even feel good. It might feel open and spacious and yummy and relaxed and light. It might be neutral. If it feels elusive, search for another spot, maybe the second best. And as you focus on it, notice, does it affect you? Do you feel like your body settled a little bit? Maybe, maybe not. And then gently bring your focus back into the space. The actual act of scanning your body is settling to the system and finding, so whether you find something or not, it's actually settling. And then if you find something, even if it's neutral, it is also settling. And again, it's like a muscle. If you do it on a regular basis, it's kind of like an internal gratitude practice, if you want to say. But finding something inside, it becomes easier and easier when I work with people with very severe trauma. Sometimes they can't even find anything. And over practice, they begin to find it and they're like, I can hold it for a minute. It's like an accomplishment. It actually is almost like a fitness for the nervous system because you're repeatedly settling. And if you're not walking around as high, when something happens, you have a little more fluidity in your nervous system. So it's a little bit of hygiene. It seems very simple, but it can be done at any time. And again, the more often it's done, it really does make a huge difference. And that's actually even those two, you can even bring someone down from a panic with those two. The other thing I do, which we don't have time to do today, is I teach people how to turn on that shaking that naturally happens in the nervous system that helps it come down the cycle. And we call it the therapeutic tremor. And we teach people how to turn it on, how to turn it off, and how to control it so that you can let that come out of your system, all the old habitual stuff that you're carrying. And if you activate it on a regular basis, again, it expands the fluidity in your nervous system to be able to handle what happens.